Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you find yourself in the world. My name is Sophia Arend, and I am the Global Blockchain Business Council Senior Analyst. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Global Blockchain Business Council and Global Digital Finance's Global Leaders Series. This is a weekly global town hall with policymakers and business leaders to hear insights into their work, the state of the blockchain and digital asset industry, and current global affairs. Today, we have the pleasure to be joined by digital asset co-founder and CEO, Yuval Rooz, and our host, Sandra Rowe, GBBC's CEO and GDF board director, for a conversation and live audience Q&A on digital asset, DAML, and the various developments and projects taking place within digital asset. Just briefly before we begin, I'd like to introduce Yuval. Yuval, as I mentioned, is the co-founder and CEO of Digital Asset, a New York-based technology company. Prior to starting Digital Asset, Yuval managed an electronic algorithmic trading desk at DRW before joining the DRW Investment Group, which is the venture capital arm of the Chicago-based trading firm run by Don Wilson, who is also a co-founder of Digital Asset. Yuval earned a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology and currently lives and works in New York and is an avid cyclist. Thank you all for joining us. We welcome your questions at any point during today's webinar. You can submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll take them throughout the webinar. Without further ado, I'll hand things off to Sandra to kick us off. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sophia, and welcome again, everyone, to the GBBC GDF Global Leader Series. I'm particularly excited to catch up with Yuval. It's been a long number of months since I last saw Yuval in Davos in person back in January. A lot has happened between then and now. We're going to catch up on not only the latest from Digital Asset, but I think what we would love to start off is just Yuval. You are an OG in the space. DA has been around for a number of years and growing, which is fantastic. But tell us a little bit more about your background, because you've actually you have traded, you've worked across tech, you've actually been part of the military, so you've got a really, really interesting background. Do you mind just giving us a quick journey of like how you ended up at DA in particular, but walk us through that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Sandra and Sierra, thank you so much for having me and for the very, very nice and warm intro. My background, the military, I'll just park that because that was mandatory and
Okay.
very unhelpful for my career, to be honest. Maybe more for my personality and character, but I went to Georgia Tech and studied electrical engineering and was always interested in technology. Although I started my career actually at Citadel, a hedge fund in Chicago, and then moved to DRW Trading. Right. So I was very focused on trading and finance. It was always from the technology side. So at Citadel, I was a software developer, focusing on risk models and modeling portfolio risk. And then at DRW trading, but again, electronic trading and not voice trading or in the pit or something like that. Right. So always thought about things from a technology perspective. In 2000 and towards the end of 2011, 12, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to think about innovation, startups. I had a few ideas for my own startup, but also was interested. How does a company like DRW stay at the forefront of technology? Because as for those who don't know DRW, it's a very big proprietary trading firm with north of 1,000 people, I think, today, that is looking at many asset classes in different places in the world. And it requires a lot of technology, especially if you're in the super low latency trading. So what we started thinking about is how do we concentrate our effort looking at technology that is strategic to DRW, in cybersecurity, to hardware. And then at that time, we actually started trading Bitcoin in 2012. So Cumberland Mining was one of the first, if not the first, institutional trader of cryptocurrencies, and today is still one of the biggest OTC trading desks in cryptocurrencies. So that desk actually was started by one of the co-founders at Digital Asset, Eric Zaranecki, who's our head of product. So he started Cumberland. I was starting to look at investments. And we started looking at investments in the space. We invested in a few companies. And as time was going on, we started realizing that the underlying technology, blockchain, is going to have a material impact, not only on Bitcoin, then later on Ethereum, but also other industries in the world. And we just couldn't find a company to invest in.
Right.
So we were looking for companies. We had a lot of ideas of what needs to happen in the space. And in 2014, together with Don, Eric, myself, we decided, well, it's time to start the company ourselves. We've seen a lot of companies in the space. We've looked at a lot of potential investments and couldn't find the right investment to make. So we just started, we'll start the company ourselves. And that's kind of how Digital Asset was born.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that. And Digital Asset has now been on a journey of many years, several years. Tell us a bit more about how DA has evolved from the early days to where you are now. And then if you could get a little bit of flavor for those who are not as familiar with what DAML is as a smart contract language, if you could go into that too, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, like I mentioned, we started looking at the space. We started thinking about what blockchain for Bitcoin was, this global ledger, shared source of truth. If you could actually have that in different asset classes, different processes, wow, what an amazing innovation. And what amount of efficiency the world could gain from deploying this technology in many industries. So we took the plunge and we started saying, okay, let's start building our own blockchain and start thinking about, what does it mean to build these types of applications? And very early on, we started engaging with some clients, and those clients were very big enterprise clients that asked us to work on very ambitious projects. And very quickly, already in 2015, so company started October 2014, very early already in 15, we started thinking about, well, what does it mean to build a blockchain application?
Right.
What does it mean to start thinking about the complexities of one shared source of truth, where now many players can manipulate that source of truth? Well, you need to have a very deterministic outcome of that system, because there's no longer this one participant that can just control the database, can delete things, can change things. Oh, I've made a mistake. Oh, there was a bug. I picked up the phone. Okay,
Right.
I'll go and just kind of like randomly change, cells in the table. And we know that that causes a lot of trouble in today's world. So we needed to figure out, well, how do you do that in a way that this blockchain will actually deliver that path forward? And that was the time where smart contracts started becoming popular. Smart contracts had this feature of self-executing, but it's not only that, it's the fact that everybody understands how the system is going to behave. And we realized that building applications on a centralized database at that scale, using traditional tools, was very hard, complicated, prone to bugs. Now, if you want to do that in a decentralized way, in a distributed manner, it becomes exponentially more complicated. And that gave the birth to DAML, this idea that we need to have a paradigm of a language that makes what we call blockchains very simple, meaning that a developer doesn't need to bother herself with what is a blockchain, how does it work? Because if you need to know all of the different complexities, you're never going to be able to be as fast or as efficient as you can without knowing that. And by the way, this is not an innovation created by Digital Asset. This trend of technology abstracting unneeded complexities underneath is happening all the time. If you are a front-end developer, you don't really need to know how assembly works. You don't need to know, all the lines of code that are written to the machine, because it doesn't provide you any differentiating value. You need to know how some of these JavaScript libraries, all these different libraries that allow you to develop front-end applications very fast,
Right.
and everything gets abstracted from you. And we took very similar mindset of, okay, we're convinced blockchain, one source of truth, one shared source of truth, is very efficient. If the world can come behind that technology, that's great. But that doesn't mean that now every developer that builds a blockchain application needs to know the inner workings of a blockchain. So what we've done is we created a language that really abstracts all of that from the developer and allows you to build very complex applications without the need to know how a blockchain works under the hood. And that resulted in the ability to build very sophisticated application at a fraction of the time.
So DAML represents, as you say, the concept of abstracting away and making things simpler is not new to blockchain, but it does solve a critical, and especially at an enterprise level, something I hear quite often, which is, what blockchain do I use? Why would I invest all this money into a project if that blockchain becomes obsolete? That's one of the critical, I think, hesitations that a lot of enterprises have. Now, you guys at DA have a lot of investors, especially some big names like VMware, Salesforce, Samsung's recently come in. How do you work with some of your investors as well from a project level or a partnership level? They've obviously invested in you financially, but how else are you engaging with those institutions or some of those institutions?
Absolutely. So, I want to first of all touch on the first point that you made, because that's critical. I think that when we start thinking about DAML, it was very selfish, very self-motivated of how do we bring applications on our blockchain as fast as possible to market. Mm-hmm. But then we realized that we've developed an asset that, because we abstracted a blockchain away from the developer, there's not even one line of code. If you were to look at DAML code, there's not even one line of code that says hash a transaction or create a private channel. There's none of that. You just write business logic, and the magic happen underneath. And depending what blockchain you choose, then it knows how to interact with that specific blockchain. And when we realized that we created a very clean abstraction, we started realizing, oh, we can work with other blockchains, not just with our own blockchain.
Right.
And the reason why that was so important is because we know that there's not going to be one blockchain to rule them all. The complexity, like I said, is pretty significant. So if you are, as a developer, can develop a product that you as a company want to offer your clients, suddenly a blockchain just becomes a technology choice rather than, oh, I have to figure out, I have to do my due diligence right now on what is the right blockchain.
Yeah.
Because if I make all the investment to develop natively to this blockchain, and a year from now I realize I made a mistake,
yeah,
guess what? That's a very expensive mistake to make. Absolutely. And then you realize that your industry is coalescing behind a different blockchain, or you realize that this blockchain is not going to meet your needs, or the price just went 10x on this blockchain. And for whatever reason, you just don't want to use it anymore. Suddenly you have to redo the whole thing. And that's the aha moment that we had with DAML, is really you could actually build your product, meet your client needs, what you want to bring to market, and then a blockchain is just a technology choice. No different than how today with a SQL database, you don't start a project by saying, well, we need to now for half a year or a year due diligence, what is the right SQL database that we will use to build our Java application on top of it? No, you just build a Java application, and at the end of the day, you talk to your company, what SQL database do we use, or can we buy another one because it's better for us? And that's it. You don't really stop yourself for like a long period of time to figure out, am I making the right technology choice? So that was important. And why is that important? Because that led to us working with bigger companies. Why? Because you're starting to see this trend of bigger companies entering the space. If it's Salesforce that did a lot of work with blockchain, Samsung is doing a lot of work with blockchain. VMware, for those of you who saw in VMworld, announced that their blockchain is coming to market after 5 years of work on it. They took a very different approach from the startups. Get to a product that works, meet enterprise client needs, and only then deploy. And we start seeing this trend. And at the end of the day, if you think about what big companies are interested in, they're interested to bring clients to their offering. And a lot of them saw this vision of DAML that says, you don't need to get yourself bogged down with the inner workings of this very complex technology to build a product to life. to build a program. And I'll take an example with VMware. We have a bunch of clients that are going to go live on VMware blockchain. They didn't even know that VMware blockchain existed, right? It was being worked behind the scenes.
Right.
But they were building with DAML. And that satisfies exactly what we talked about till now, is suddenly VMware invested, we built a very good partnership, we really believe in their product. And suddenly we introduced them to some of our clients. And those clients said, global support team, unlike any other, VMware runs some of the most critical enterprise infrastructures in the world. For those of you who don't know, the ATM system in the US runs on VMware hardware and technology. Like, they run really critical infrastructure, and their technology is really good. It meets all of our security, scalability. Can DAML run on it? And then the answer is yes, right? So I think that, you know, for VMware, it was a really good match because they know how to bring enterprise software. And what we've done is we've brought this ability to build application at a fractional of the time that will still run on their technology. And that's how we are cooperating with those big technology firms. And there's going to be more, hopefully, announced in the next few months.
Well, fantastic. And look, I think we can't underscore enough what a major advancement this is, especially for enterprises when they don't have to lock themselves into a blockchain solution. They build on DAML, and it can be transported from one to another if, for whatever reason, over time, there needs to be a movement from one blockchain to the next. And actually, what you just said really resonates. I think a lot of us in the industry say we have had success once we stop talking about the blockchain and it just runs underneath and nobody knows, but there's actually a sound, resilient blockchain system running the whatever application it might be. And you're taking us one step further in that direction, or several steps further in that direction. That's fantastic. So I want to switch gears just a little bit from a geography standpoint. You guys are working on projects in a lot of different locations, a lot of different types of enterprises. How do you go about determining where you are going to work on projects? Or is it specific industries that you're targeting, specific jurisdictions? Could you give us and the audience a flavor for how you decide where you're going to go and engage?
Yeah, so I'll start first of all with what do we qualify as a suitable distributed application? And I'm saying on purpose distributed application, not just blockchain, because digital asset or DAML runs on technologies that are not necessarily just blockchain, where there's a lot of value in the thought process of blockchain. How do we share the source of truth with having very deterministic outcome to who is allowed to change the data under what scenario? So if you think about the problem that way, we think that any industry that has very complex multi-party applications, meaning many users are going to interact with the data, and the data has very or a large number of permutations of how it can change over time, that's where DAML is a very good tool for that. And the reason why I said distributed applications, because if you think about any large enterprise, take a bank.
Yeah.
A bank within itself could actually doesn't need a blockchain because they all rely and they all trust each other that nobody's going to go and manipulate their own data to cheat themselves, right? So in a lot of cases, for example, a bank that is trying to orchestrate all the different groups within the bank to look at one source of data could actually use DAML. So we're actually working with a bunch of banks to actually orchestrate how does their front office, middle office, back office, risk, regulatory reporting, all of those different things interact with one set of data. And again, that data could sit on their centralized database, but is orchestrated as if it's a distributed application that says, well, I have all these different users, and all these different users are going to interact with my core data. So I want to model it like a blockchain network. So I have very clear roles and responsibilities of who's interacting with the data. On the other hand, there are different places where you don't have just one legal entity and you have multiple legal entities interacting with the source of data. And that's where blockchain is a very good underlying technology. But again, multi-party in nature, multiple participants, multiple users interacting with the same source of data and want to have very deterministic outcome. So that's just, first of all, how do we choose, is DAML the right tool for what you're trying to do? If you came to us and you said, I want to run a Monte Carlo simulation to price options, we will say, not our shtick, and you should not use DAML for that.
Yeah.
You should use Python libraries. There's plenty of tools out there, and DAML is not going to be the right tool for that. So that's one thing.
Okay.
In terms of geographic location, one of the most important things to know about digital asset is, although we do work with clients directly, we also have a great network of partners, and those partners exist all over the world. So in many cases, when you're seeing a lot of DAML-based projects, digital asset is not necessarily the entity that is doing the entire service. So we work with partners like Accenture, IntellectU, GFT. There has been a lot of announcement, ChainStack, multiple consulting firms can offer our services. We have BTP can offer DAML on top of different ledgers. So there's a pretty wide network of partners that help us deliver. So that allows us to achieve the scale on a global level. And then second of all, at the end of the day, I think that, and this is a challenge specifically in blockchain, we have already offices all over the world, so we have the reach. But to me, what's actually more important is, what are the projects that we see will go into production? And I think that we're in 2020, we're in a phase where people got tired of doing POCs, so that's a good thing. For the most part, most projects that are being thought of today will go into production. But for us, it's more, will it go into production, and will it have this step forward for the industry if it did? Because I do think that there's a lot of projects that people said, well, we're in production with a blockchain. And we're like, did you really need a blockchain for that? And did you really just do it to say that you have a blockchain project?
Yeah.
So really want to push projects that we believe really takes advantage of the technology to its fullest, because I think that that will help leapfrog the industry further, even faster.
You've taken me right to the next question I was going to ask you. And frankly, I agree with you. There were quite a number of vanity, what I call vanity blockchain projects at the enterprise level. That really, when you look underneath the surface, it's just, you didn't need a blockchain. And you know, frankly, if they go to production, I'd be surprised. But having said that, in the current life cycle of where we are, you know, we're a number of years in. This is not, you know, totally the first inning, but people still say we've got decades ahead of digital infrastructure being laid out. What is your view on where we are from an enterprise blockchain perspective in terms of the life cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wanna make people just make sure that they put in context that cloud, for example, that's been around for a very, very long time, is still not mainstream at the scale that it could be. There are still customers that we talk to when we say we can deploy your DAML ledger on the cloud. They're like, can't do that. Can't put personal client information on the cloud. Can't do it. So I just want to make sure that let's put a reference point to something that we believe is mature enough and has all the capabilities. That is still not as mainstream as it could be. So I just want to put that as a point of reference. And I'm not trying to be now defensive about blockchain, but I just want people to understand that the risk reward, we need to understand what is the risk reward of enterprises. And an enterprise needs to make decisions, not necessarily that are, if you talk to them from a numbers, definitely more efficient to go to the cloud, definitely more efficient to go to the efficient in terms of price, efficient in terms of operations, scalability, resiliency, like so many different features would be a no-brainer. So it seems like a rational thing to move to the cloud. The downside is if there is an issue or a breach or anything like that, someone is going to say you gave control, right? You gave someone else control over your data, and look what happened, right? And that rational conversation will never win in that kind of an argument. So we need to understand that people take time. It takes time to get people that get comfortable with these type of technologies. So now we need to remember, what is blockchain all about? And I think that once you think about it in that context, I think people will understand the adoption cycle. If you think about what are the use cases that people are talking about with regards to blockchain all over the world, it's books and records. Those are the hearts of enterprises, right? There's a lot of projects in blockchain that are on the periphery. If all that data got lost, got hacked or whatever, not that it would be great, but it wouldn't be the same as our core books and records are being exposed or being manipulated in a way that we can't control. And because of that nature of what are the really good blockchain applications, I think that people are being extra careful. And that's actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing for that. So I think that, if you think back to my previous question, what are the projects that we go after? I think those are the type of projects that if we prove that more and more companies are willing to trust this technology, even for book and record systems, meaning those are going to be running critical infrastructure, meaning if that infrastructure gets damaged, it will be a significant impact. I think that that gets the whole industry much more comfortable that this technology is ready for prime time. No different that now you're seeing with cloud. Now you're seeing more and more banks are moving more and more services.
Sure.
It takes time. But I just want people to understand that we're not talking about IMing between employees or between enterprises. This is not that kind of, this is books and records. And for those of you who know about books and records within industries like insurance, like financial services, like healthcare, those are not systems that get replaced every 2 years, every 3 years, every 5 years, every 10 years. There are some systems that we replace that are 20 plus years old.
Yes.
The reason is because there's so much sensitivity around these systems. And that's just something that I think if you have that in context, you are actually pretty impressed with how fast this industry have moved forward rather than how slow.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely in the camp that a lot has happened in even the last 5 years. And frankly, we've got decades ahead of us. And also, as an add-on to the comments that you made, Yuval, I also want to say, let's face it, where there's real potential change as well is with governments. I mean, who are major keepers of records, sensitive records and data. Different government departments that have spent 50, 60 years not upgrading their systems, frankly. So there's a lot of advantages there. And I think another sector that just doesn't get a lot of airtime, which is innovating quite a bit, is the development nonprofit NGO sector, which, when you look at a scale of like the World Food Program, that which just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and very big UN organizations that are dealing in billions, like they're also innovating in the space and frankly doing some really interesting things. But it's still early days, so we'll have to see how many of these initiatives become full-blown production ready, become the infrastructure of the future. But appreciate your views on that. I think it's critical that we are patient, but yet we see there's a lot going on. Okay, I am going to, it's not a curveball, but it's more of a, topic du jour question, which is around central bank digital currencies. I find it actually still pretty amazing that the concept's been around for years. I mean, I heard back in 2014 when Bank of England was looking at experiments around, they were doing the research around central bank digital currency, but now it's just really exploded onto the scene. And I guess you could argue between Libra and the pandemic, and also maybe what China's doing and some of the other big countries, maybe that's why it's all been accelerated. But would love to get your take on how CBDCs may impact what you are doing at DA, and just views in general about sort of, maybe not from an economic standpoint, but just how do central bank digital currencies play a role at all in the future of, this future that we're all building?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a great topic, and I think it is very important that it stays a hot topic because I think the potential is huge. But I want to take maybe a step back and just make sure that people understand what I think is the potential, but also to think about some of the issues that could come up when you think about digital currency. So I want to first of all start with, imagine a world where programmable money could have attributes that today we can't even think about. Like just recently, I just want to take, everybody thought about CBDC in the context of the US stimulus package. Oh, wouldn't it be easy if you could just press a button and every citizen that was entitled for the $500 would just get it with a click. Yeah, I think that's great. But I want to take it one step further. Imagine that you could actually click the button, everybody would get their $500, and you would actually be able to use your stimulus dollar on what the US government wants to stimulate, right? It's not only the fact that you as a citizen should get the $500, but we want to encourage you spending it on small businesses. We want to encourage you spending it only on rent. We don't want you to take the $500, go to the casino and put the whole $500 on a roulette, for example. Can you imagine money, fiat currency that can actually enforce that behavior? That gives, I think, central bankers really precision tools how to manage monetary policies. Or if you want to do between banks, all kinds of managing how money moves and to have actually atomic transactions between fiat currency and capital markets. Again, certain things that today are not possible. So to me, I think that first of all, that the idea of programmable money is huge, right? And if we talked about blockchain being early days, I think that the what programmable money will mean in the future could be a world that we can't even imagine today. Certain things, think about IoT devices that are thinking about carbon emission and can pay your dues automatically on your behalf. There's just so many different things that you could imagine happening in the world when you have programmable money. That's just one thing. Now, the question is, should programmable money be on a blockchain? Because you could have programmable money that is not necessarily CBDC. And I think a lot of times people conflate the two and ask the question of why would you need that versus the other? And before I get to answer that, I think that another time what people accidentally say is look at international settlement of currency. It's so slow and cumbersome, but actually that's not really true. CLS today settles 18 currencies in the trillions of dollars every day, very efficiently, with very low risk. The reason why they don't have more currencies is not because of technology. There's no technology barrier for CLS to turn another 10 currencies, another 20 currencies, and to be able to move all the currencies in the world. The reason why they don't do that is for regulatory and other reasons why they don't want to take the counterparty risk. And those risks will still exist if you're on a blockchain, because what happens if you are expecting someone to move from a country where there's no diplomatic relationships or legal relationships, and now someone has done something bad in that country? How do you go and actually enforce? So there's more questions just beyond technology. I just want, and we're at Digital Asset are not naive about that. Technology can reduce a lot of friction from the system. Sure. And you should definitely think about that, but it doesn't solve all the problems, and regulatory and legal work still needs to take place. But now if we go back to, should it be blockchain or just any type of digital form of currency? I think today's money is in digital form. Yeah. There's no, nobody, for the most part, most of the money that moves in the world doesn't move with people sending bills. It moves on electronic system. It gets represented in digital ledgers. I think what's interesting of using blockchain, and this is what I would hope central bankers are going to talk about, is now how can we take these central, or this one source of truth of all the fiat currency and people that, and now be able to interoperate with other systems atomically. And that's something that you cannot do with currency today. So today, the Fed wire, although is an electronic message and it goes to you cannot have an atomic transaction between a Fed wire and a US Treasury transaction. No, you actually have settlement risk there. So I think that there is an ability to put all asset classes, where fiat currency is one of them, into one type of technology. And I'm saying type of technology on purpose, because not all asset classes and not all fiat currencies are all going to sit on the same ledger, but be able to do transactions across these ledgers. And that's why I think for central bank digital currency to be successful, I think requirement number one needs to be, can you interoperate with other technologies? Because then I don't get the point of doing central bank digital currency on a blockchain unless you can interoperate with other systems.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think we have many more opportunities to see how this unfolds. And frankly, I think it has more impact than people realize in their day-to-day, but hopefully for the better, not for the worse. I do worry about privacy because cash, I can spend and give to you. I have no idea who spent the bill that I got from before. And if I give it to you, I don't know what you're going to do with it. But the tracking of programmable money, I think, just raises some questions around how much the government will snoop around and what you're doing and what that will look like. But it will be the design and governance of each CBDC to be turned. There are now a number of questions for you, but I am going to ask one more question, Yuval, before I turn to Q&A. For those who are in the audience who would like to ask questions, feel free to drop your question in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many before the end of the hour. Thanks very much. Let's turn to, and you mentioned this very quickly, carbon credits. You are working on a very exciting initiative related to carbon credits. If you could give us just a little bit of insight into what it is DA is involved with, why is it important, and frankly, how does this tie in with potentially helping issues around climate change and SDGs?
Yeah, so I'll start first of all, and this is me using this platform for a bit of marketing. Odyssey, which is a member of GBBC,
yes,
is creating a global hackathon in November, and everybody should look into that. And if we can send the link, that would be great. I think initiatives like Odyssey that are trying to say, how can we use technology to make the world a better place, are super, super important. And if you'll see the platform that they've built for the virtual hackathon, it's pretty out there, but it's pretty exciting, the type of environment that they've created. But they're going to have thousands of people coalescing together to solve, how do we bring circular economies faster to market? How do we think about carbon emission? And all using any technology that you want. So this is not just using DAML, it's using, you could use different technologies, but the idea is, how can we use technology, especially this type of technology, blockchain and smart contracts, to really make circular economies and more efficient economies a real thing. So that's just some of the initiatives that are happening in the space. We are very supportive of Odyssey, and we're going to support the teams there, but it's not a digital asset or a DAML type of initiative. Second of all, I think that if you start thinking about carbon emission, one of the biggest issues with carbon markets is, how do I verify, very similarly to what Bitcoin tried to solve, how do I verify that, Sandra, you're an amazing person, you just want to be energy clean, and I come and I say to you, I have this great carbon emission project I want to sell to you. And you say, great, that can offset my entire year's spend, I'm gonna buy it. And then a year later, you find out that Yuval went and sold the same carbon project to like 30 different people. And really all you bought is 1/30 of the carbon emission that you thought you were offsetting. And that actually still takes place. That still happens, this double spend of carbon emissions. So the idea that you can create networks where enterprise buyers that want to offset their carbon footprint can go and buy and verify that a digital representation of a carbon instrument has been registered once and only once,
yes,
could take us one step further. Now, it doesn't mean that if I go and register my carbon on this digital ledger, I can go and try to sell it for someone off ledger. But the idea is that the more you would have these kind of global networks that can verify that the same asset was not registered twice, you will see a trend of companies saying, well, unless you're on this verified ledger, I'm not buying it from you.
Yep.
So go first of all, register your asset, and then I'm going to buy it from you. And hopefully that trend will prevent this fraud. It's almost like Carfax, right? If you don't have a Carfax, I'm not buying your car because there's something fishy about it, right? So it's very similar trend of, can we create this global ledger or ledger of ledgers again, interoperability, as you'll see, is something that I think is critical, because not every registry of carbon offsets is necessarily going to use the same technology. So how do we allow them to communicate with one another and make sure that things don't get double registered across the world? And I think that will create a trend that will eliminate, to some extent, fraud in carbon offsetting products. I think that one of the things, and this is just a shout out to GBBC, as you start thinking about global ledgers and many players, you start asking the question, standardizing, right? Ooh, how do you agree? What is a carbon offset? What is the accounting of a carbon offset? How do we agree? What does it mean to register a digital asset of a carbon offsetting product? I think that becomes a much bigger topic beyond carbon offset, but I think that the idea of coming up with some form of common denominator standards is a great start. And eventually, over time, official standards will get formed. I think that this question always comes up. Do you need to set standards before you start working? I think that that's not a realistic approach. People want to get going. People have timelines. People need to achieve. But can you create these common denominator? Can we just agree that a carbon offset needs to have, for example, what type of instrument is it? Is it wind? Is it solar? Is it trees? Is whatever? Can we agree that you have some kind of measurement of how much it's going to offset? So you don't need to go into like super fine detail. You can start with some common denominator that at least on those, it's easy to agree. And GBBC is doing quite a lot of good work in the space, and IWA is now going to, I think, join forces with GBBC. So those initiatives all over the world are taking place and are very encouraging.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to harken back what you said about Odyssey, Rutger, if you're listening, we're plugging you guys because you're doing work. Odyssey Momentum. If you guys Google that, you should be able to find the URL, but highly recommend that you check it out. It's a mid-November event over several days. Even if we can't be physically together in the Netherlands, we can definitely be together online. So appreciate all the work that Rutger and his team have put together. And then separately, the Global Standards Mapping Initiative, the GSMI, was launched in conjunction with a number of GBC partners, as well as the World Economic Forum as our main partner. Please check it out. There's an interactive world map that literally maps out 185 jurisdictions from a legal and regulatory standpoint. And then there's 2 reports, one on technical evaluation on 30 plus different industry standard setting bodies, as well as we've listed about nearly 400 industry consortia. There's more than that. And we agree with you, Yuval. There's a ton of activity going on. We're going to get to a place where there's some common denominator agreement, but allowing for the proliferation of the amazing innovation that's still going on today. I think that balance is a difficult one to try to get right, but we're going to keep trying. So I'm going to go to now some of the questions that are here, and you've answered some of them. So I think you could probably give a brief response to a couple of them. One is around, are we involved in a blockchain arms race? Does 1 or 2 prevail?
I think that, more than 2 will prevail in terms of arm race. I guess that's a good sign for technologies where people see the potential, and yeah, you will see a lot of big tech companies coming into the space, because no different than databases, it will be economies of scale. So yeah, I do think that you will see multiple versions of blockchains.
Here's one from an anonymous attendee saying, when do you think blockchain solutions will become ubiquitous, when I will be able to travel with a digital ID using micropayments to pay my Uber driver, et cetera, et cetera? I guess a seamless consumer experience.
Yeah, seamless consumer experience. I think that you will see that within the next 5 years. I don't think that only central bank digital currency is a must in order to make what you've described a reality. But I think that you're going to start seeing, especially around digital identity within the next 2 years, a lot of projects that are trying to create a seamless experience from a user perspective. So I actually think that on the identity side, within the next 2 years, you will start seeing projects popping out with digital identity can able and can travel from one ecosystem to another seamlessly.
Fantastic. And this is a direct DA question. Are there any particular industries DA's most focused or particularly excited about?
Yeah, so I think that for us, we started in financial services. A lot of the DNA in the company is from financial services, but we're very active in healthcare, insurance, supply chain, and trade finance. But I would say that most of the emphasis is financial services, healthcare these days.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, healthcare is certainly top of mind.
Actually, if I may, Sandra,
Yeah.
this is more me. We're 7 days from an election, and I'm not going to go into politics, but I'm going to talk about what you just said when it comes to healthcare. I'm always amazed how less of the conversation is being talked about how the healthcare industry as a whole could become more affordable. Doesn't matter what is your political orientation, by becoming more efficient. And that's why I'm very excited about working in the healthcare space. I see just a lot of opportunity, how as an industry, it could just become more affordable by running more efficiently. I think no different that the cost pressure that you're seeing in financial services
Yes.
is driven because at the end of the day, if the top line is limited or is going in certain trend, the best way to make the bottom line also get bigger is become more efficient. And I think that you could, if you think about the bottom line as the cost to the consumer, well, you could either reduce the price that you're charging from the consumer, which is where most of the conversation is being held, or you could say, well, actually, let's just reduce the cost, and reducing the cost will make healthcare more affordable. So I'm very, very excited about some of the opportunities within healthcare to use this technology.
That's an excellent point. And frankly, there's probably many different low-hanging fruit with regards to increasing efficiency and lowering costs in the sector. So yeah. You'll be quite busy. I think you've already answered this question around standards. Do you think the standards for the industry, what do you think about standards for the industry? Are they important? Do you think they're premature right now? I think you've already answered that one.
Yeah, I think official standards are premature, but you don't need to have official standards to move forward. I do think that given that we're talking about one source of truth, it is important to have some common denominator, because at the end of the day, that's the best way to coalesce people together. That to me is some sort of a standard, but not an official standard. And I think that that's some of the initiatives that we are participating in, and I do see good traction in that space.
Question regarding how do you, I think DA, engage with regulators? How do you make sure they get good information about blockchain, its uses? Do you need to deal with the regulators?
That's a great question. I think that regulators are a critical part of this technology. Again, if you go back to what we said this technology touches, it touches books and records. Books and records is something that regulators are very interested in. And one of the things that I've learned from experience is regulators have all the best intentions. They really want to get the work done well. They're public servants. Regulators are not entrepreneurs that are doing it for equity going up, right? They're doing it because they have a passion about making markets, different type of systems and ecosystems run efficiently and better for the consumer.
Right.
At the end of the day, their understanding of the technology cannot be as in-depth as the people who are creating it. And that's why for us who are creating it, have a critical role to educate them and to make sure that they are engaged. I think that in a lot of cases in blockchain and crypto, people just went far very quickly and just said regulators just don't understand. So great, you're going to get a response for someone that doesn't understand what you're doing. And don't expect to be happy if the outcome is not something that you are pleased with. So I actually think that as an industry, we have a critical role working together with regulators, making sure that they are educated and they understand the risks and the benefits of this technology, right?
Sure.
And if they're educated and well-informed, they can make good decisions.
Absolutely. I want to ask now a question from an audience member who's asking about your carbon credits topic. The issue of carbon credits also involves issues of geopolitics. Some countries would like to count their preservation efforts towards their own carbon offsets and sell them too. Do we also need international consensus on what's allowable before we can solve the double spend problem?
Yeah, I think that it's not a chicken versus egg type of problem. I think that the point that you're raising is a very good point that needs to be addressed. Again, to me, technology is an enabler, right? So when you think about carbon credits, the use of blockchain and smart contracts enables the ability of a global ledger to avoid fraud. That is something that, regardless if your problem gets solved before or after, is something that you will need. So to me, it's more of a on the side, one thing needs to happen. At the same time, the question and the problem that you're raising is a very good point that need to be addressed regardless if blockchain was to be used or not in the context of carbon credits.
Great, thank you for that. Good morning to you, Ruba. It's not a question. Ruba was saying good morning to us. Dean has asked, will blockchain follow the same adoption path as cloud computing in capital markets? Do you think it'll follow a similar development path?
I actually think if you make that comparison, I would say that blockchain is moving faster than cloud. If we're 5 to 6 years in, you do see already significant players already playing on some critical pieces of infrastructure. So I actually think, and the reason why is that you could still run a private blockchain that runs on-prem and doesn't have to run in the cloud. So I actually think that specifically with blockchain, you could actually preserve privacy, or not preserve privacy because that's me saying that cloud is not private, but have the keys to your infrastructure rather than handing it over to someone else. So I actually think that, and I think that there's already signs of that the adoption of blockchain to some critical systems is more advanced. I want to remind people, cloud as technology is much more horizontal. There's much more applications for cloud than there are for blockchain. So you can't also make, I would say that if you want to make the comparison in terms of how much is being used compared to cloud, you also need to normalize it with what is the total addressable market of cloud versus blockchain, which would not be apples to apples.
Right. And Abby's got a similar question, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit related to cloud and blockchain. Do you think actually blockchain is a potential enabler for more cloud adoption in regulated industries? Do you think that blockchain would actually enable cloud adoption? That's a good question, Abby.
Yeah, it is a very interesting question. I want to say yes. I wouldn't be able to give you a really hard scientific answer to that. Again, I think that people really want to understand blockchain, and it's just so much easier to deploy it in cloud and get going. So maybe because of that, but that's more of a gut instinct rather than empirical evidence out there.
Right. Okay, we're going to get into a little bit more esoteric type of questioning. Will the U.S. be able to keep up? And I think the context of this is obviously, we in the industry and a lot of others around the world have seen the U.S. is not really led with respect to taking up the mantle, particularly the government. Like, for example, Xi Jinping in China has actually declared blockchain a major priority initiative. And you've got countries like Switzerland and Singapore who've obviously become very foot forward related to regulatory clarity and promoting innovation, as well as many other countries. So what's your take on the US? You're a US company.
So we're forced to talk a bit of politics. Just a little bit. I think that maybe my answer would be slightly different in the sense of in how many areas, not just blockchain, have the U.S. been behind in the last few years. And I think that is going to change. I think that just realistically, we want to make sure that we understand the U.S. is a superpower when it comes to technology, and that is not changing. I think that it's valid to state that blockchain, specifically when it comes to critical systems, is also a policy question. And I think that that's the point that is raised really well is that it's not necessarily from a technology. I would still say that some of the biggest innovation when it comes to technology in blockchain is happening in the US. The fact is, the usage of the technology is not just a technology question, it's a policy question. And that's why I said there's other policy areas where the US have been lagging or not as involved as the rest of the world. But at the end of the day, what we're doing a digital asset, for example, BSN, the Chinese blockchain, announced DAML as the exclusive smart contract just a month ago, and we're working. But to answer, I think the US will remain a superpower when it comes to technology. I hope to see difference or a different approach to policy, and that's with regards to so many different things, not just blockchain.
Absolutely. And look, we've got just a few minutes left, so I appreciate there's some more questions here, but I'm going to end with asking you this question, which is really for the entrepreneurs out there. 2020 has been a tough year for a lot of people, for most people. Can't imagine that it's been any less challenging for you as a leader of a major company. Can you give us some advice, some insights into how you've dealt with the pandemic and also the shifting of, everyone going home basically to work, as well as just maybe some hope for those as we look out to 2021 to the entrepreneurs out there? We appreciate it. Your final words.
Yeah, that's a great last question, and thank you for asking it. So first of all, I'll start with on a personal note. You mentioned in the introduction an avid cyclist. So if I were to turn the camera, you would see my bicycle here.
Awesome.
And I get on that and get a lot of energy out. But really, it's been a tough year. But actually, if anything, to me, it was a beautiful year because it really showed our strength as people and really what is our ability when we decide to come together, the things that we can do. So first of all, as an entrepreneur, my biggest advice is, first of all, take care of yourself. I think that this is something that gets really easily lost between all the Zoom meetings. You wake up in the morning, you don't even need to brush your teeth. You just need to fix your hair, look like as if you put a clean t-shirt, and it's good, right? You can get started right away and you don't have downtime. Right. And to be honest, having no downtime could yield to very bad mistakes and very bad decision-making. So first of all, take care of yourself, take care of your family, then take care of your employees. I think that it's very easy to get lost and be worried about what will happen to the business. And you get lost because you don't have that physical human connection. You don't think about how hard it is to be someone that you don't interact with on a daily basis. People have challenges. Not everybody has school or care for their kids. So I do think that if you take care of yourself, you'll get that perspective of what does it mean to take care of your employees, which is really, really important during these times. Second of all, I think that specifically if we think about us as entrepreneurs in this space, blockchain smart contracts is all about digitization. And if anything, this pandemic has just exposed how critical this type of technology is for certain industries. One thing that I talk to a lot of business owners is business continuity plan. Always envisioned going down from the office, running to some corner, waiting till the fire department tells you can go back up. Nobody, business continuity plan, contemplated we need to now work from home for a long period of time. And what happens with all these manual processes between us internally and between us externally? And that operational risk has created a massive opportunity for this industry. So it's not great because this is a terrible time for so many people. I do think that as an entrepreneur, specifically in this space, I'm very hopeful about the opportunity. But that is totally not worth it unless you, your employees, your family are all being taken care of. And that's really the message that I want to end with.
Well, Yuval, that's a great message. And frankly, thank you so much for spending the time with us. We know how incredibly busy you are and the myriad of activities and initiatives that you've got going on at DA. We really appreciate your time and, frankly, the audience chance to get to know you a bit better as a leader and as a person. So really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And back over to you, Sophia.
Yes, thank you all for spending time with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined us and for your insightful questions. As we mentioned, a recording of this webinar will be made available online and shared with you. And we will also circulate the links to Digital Asset, Odyssey Momentum, and the GSMI all mentioned today so you can learn more. Lastly, I'd like to say that next week's Global Leader Series will take place on November the 3rd with the chairman of the Commodities and Future Trading Commission, Heath Herbert. So we hope you can join us. Thank you, Yuval. Thank you, Sandra. And have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.